once it started.
Right, good morning everybody from all parts of the world and in transit as well. So welcome to this hybrid meeting of the IJB Audit Committee. I would remind all attendees that this meeting is being recorded and webcast live on the Council's YouTube channel. I have agreed the attendance of some members remotely and would remind all remote attendees to mute their microphones when not speaking. As members are aware, item 10, report number IJB 6723, the 22-23 audited annual accounts, was not issued to members in line with Standing Order 5.1 at least 5 working days prior to the meeting. However, in accordance with the provisions of Standing Orders 3.5, and as chair of the meeting, I determine that the report has been issued to members in sufficient time to consider the contents and determine that report IJB 6723 be considered. That's based on content. Also, at this point, I'd like to just mention that I'll take item 9, the internal audit, the workforce plan, before item 8, which is assurances from partners, as this will make the agenda flow more smoothly or logically in that way. So, item number 1, apologies.
As Chair, there's apologies from Hayley Mearns.
Thank you. Item number 2, members are reminded that in terms of the Code of Conduct of devolved public bodies, it's responsible to make decisions whether to declare any interests, or are there any interests to declare? I don't see any nods. Okay, so we'll move on to item number 3. If you just excuse me, bear with me a while. I'm having a few technical issues here. Item number 3A, which is the minutes of the Audit Committee from the 21st of June. I hope you've all had a chance to read them. So I'm not intending to go through page by page, so I just want to see if there's anybody got any questions or issues with the minutes. Don't see anything there. Okay, so can we adopt those minutes? We just have no dissenters, so we'll assume they're duly adopted. So now we move on to 3.
Chair, could I just make a...
Oh, sorry.
Just a quick comment.
Yes, please do.
Just to join two things together. So we're obviously seeing the Audit Committee minutes from our last meeting today. Those minutes are routinely shared with the IJB, usually on the same day. But just for people's interest, today at the IJB meeting this afternoon, we're also taking an Audit Committee Chair's Assurance Report for the first time to the IJB meeting, and that includes the minute as well. But it's just giving the IJB itself an update about where, the last meeting of the IJB's Audit Committee in a way that's hopefully a wee bit more complete and comprehensive than you would gather just from looking at the minutes. So that's something that you would see if you're looking at the IJB meeting papers itself. Thanks, Chair.
Well, thanks for explaining that. So once we approve this minute, which we have done, this minute is now further ahead than the one in the IJB, because at least it's approved. Thank you. Move on to item 3B, which is the action points. Sandy, would you like to talk us through these, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, so obviously it's our usual action points. It's not been that long, dare I say, since the last meeting of this committee, only 2 months, and some of that has been consumed by summer holidays for certainly me. So we haven't perhaps made as much progress as we would have hoped. That said, a lot of the recent actions are green, so will complete themselves very quickly. The one I just want to comment on, unless there's any questions, is the second last one, where we've got it down as being blue, so we have got a different treatment there. And what we're really saying is this was duplicating itself, because this action was already captured in the governance action plan. So it's not solved in itself, but we're just trying to remove the duplication to make, basically, so we're not seeing these things twice and it's only going to appear in one place. But that's the only comment I choose to make, Chair, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Peter.
Peter.
Peter. You.
Yeah. Thank you. As regards item 8 on page 14, why is it still outstanding? What is the difficulty? Turnover inevitable.
Peter, I think you're talking about the issues about the development sessions and the training materials. Is that right?
Oh, that is good.
No, it was to do with the turnover on the committee. I think.
Definitely worth it.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, Peter. Yes. So the issue with that point is we were reflecting at times.
Anyone join up with us?
Conversations.
Thanks, Peter. Sorry. The issue with that was that as we did our self-assessment some time ago, we were reflecting the fact that the Audit Committee has at times experienced quite a bit of turnover, not so much in the last year, but certainly at times has experienced quite a bit of turnover. And we needed to make sure that the training materials and the way we provided training responded to the fact that sometimes the committee membership was turning over quite rapidly. And that was really about trying to make sure that we had more resources available to people to access as and when they were joining the committee. There have been a number of actions that we've got kind of stuck with that have got towards the bottom of these lists. This is one of them. And it really is just a case of trying to make sure we've got documented in one place the materials that are available to people. The fact that we do have an induction session with new members, including people like yourself and everybody else who's joined the board, will always have that. But we've just, literally just not got around to doing some of these things. This will be relatively easy to do when we do get around to doing it in terms of documenting the resources. And it's just something that maybe I could say it now, given that it's 4 years overdue. It's probably fair to say I haven't prioritised this enough in the intervening few years. There has been material made available to people, but I'm relatively confident we're going to get to these things quite soon. And I would hope by the time we get to December, this one will be resolved.
Peter, is that okay, that answer? Thank you. Just before we move on to the next item, it was remiss of me, there are a couple of new faces that we don't normally see on the the meeting, and that's Barry Hudson and Rona Swanky. And Barry, I understand you're standing in for Jocelyn today.
Yes, thank you.
On behalf of the internal auditors, and Rona, can you? Oh, and Pauline Gillen. Yeah, well, you've been on the meetings before, but Pauline is Mark's colleague and from Audit Scotland, and Rona Swanky, Sandy.
Yeah, Riona works in my team. Riona's attended a couple of meetings in person before. Riona helps compile some of the reports, including things like the internal audit follow-up report and the governance action reports, and our action points. So Riona's here just to take help with all that work.
Right. Well, welcome to our meeting. Thank you for attending. Okay, so if we can move on to item 4, which is the audit the annual internal audit plan for 23-24. I don't know who's going to speak to that. Is it Barry or yourself?
Chair, I'll introduce it and then I'll pass over to Barry. Barry is covering for Jocelyn today. But between us, hopefully, we can deal with any questions. So, on an annual basis, we compile our internal audit plan, and the covering paper describes how we compile that, and the factors we look at, things like risk-based judgments about what we feel needs to be the content of the audit report. We have made a change, and I'll let Barry at least maybe touch on that in terms of the content of the programme for the year to come. And it's quite a significant change, and hopefully it's going to be one that's constructive, makes things a bit more timely. And we've done all that largely in consultation with Barry's colleagues, Jocelyn Lyle and Judith Treves. But the main body of the report is the appendix, and is the plan in section 4. So I'll let Barry come in there to just describe that, and then between us, hopefully, you can pick up any questions.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair and Sandy. This report has sort of two main components. Firstly, the approval of the IJB Audit Plan for 23-24, and secondly, the approval of the Audit Charter. In relation to the Audit Plan, we have reviewed the extent of the IJB, and several of those have been subject to previous audit review. We've also held discussions with the Chief Officer and Chief Finance Officer to help populate the plan. Views have also been sought from other members of the executive management team in order to try and sort of maximise value within the audit plan for 23-24. The biggest difference you'll see to the previous year plan is the proposal to introduce internal control evaluation, which within the audit world we actually call the ICE. We plan to deliver this as a sort of mid-year review rather than doing a full review at year end. And that will give us the opportunity to review all the areas of governance at a time of the year that will suit the organisation better. And that will allow us to reduce the time budgeted for our year-end plan. And I think that will help with the overall arrangements for year-end. The Audit Charter, that's the same version as was last year. There's no changes, so I have nothing to update around that item. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Barry. Yeah, that's good news about the ICE, and it certainly will smooth things and make it less back-year loaded, I guess. So that's to be welcomed, yes, in that respect. And it's noted that the Charter doesn't really change that much, if at all. Has anybody got any questions? Can I throw open to the meeting? I don't see any questions, so I'll proceed straight to the recommendations, which is the Audit Committee is asked to approve the internal audit plan for 23-24 and requests that the internal auditors proceed with the implementation of the approved internal plan and report back to the Audit Committee regarding progress of this plan, and finally approve the internal audit charter and note that no updates are required. Are we happy with these recommendations? Yes, thank you. Very well, I'll move on to item 5, which is the internal audit report follow-up actions. And again, that's if I can ask Sandy to go through these in the normal way, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Okay, so the internal audit follow-up actions, it does seem when we look at Appendix 1 that this appendix just gets longer and longer and longer. It somehow has got itself to 6 pages. I take a small element of comfort in fact that 2.5 of those 6 pages were added on at the last meeting. So they're all things that have fallen out of the due meeting. So a lot of it is pretty current, and some of the current stuff is well, a lot of it's green and other bits of that are blue. So although it's getting a longer report, we are, I feel, still picking away at some of the longer standing issues. It sometimes doesn't feel like it, but I feel we are. And a lot of this is relatively new. So aside from putting my kind of grand apologies in for the fact that the action list is getting longer, I really have just a couple of things that I want to highlight. One is the content of the appendix, where we're getting an update about the information governance strategy, which has been a long-standing, outstanding issue, going back to last summer. And you know, that's obviously there for everybody to read. To some extent, it's encapsulated by the very last sentence in that, where we reference the fact that rather than potentially working on an information governance strategy in the future, we're probably going to change that, reflecting what's set out here in this appendix, to something more like an information governance framework. And that will, in due course, come to the IJB, which will deal with the outstanding audit points. So that will link that together. The other point, I maybe should have put this in the covering report, but on reflection, I should have. It's regarding another information governance action from report ANG 4622, and it's one of the few points that we've got down is superseded in the appendix, and it's an action where we have taken it as far as we can go within the IJB, and we're now flagging up that the matters associated with the digital strategies are now being progressed through both partners' digital strategies, Angus Council and NHS side, and that really will be the way we see these issues resolved. So we feel this action is very much now being superseded by the partners' digital strategies. So, Chair, that's the main points I wanted to flag up, and apologies made, but I'm obviously happy to take any questions. I do feel we are gradually picking away at this, and in due course we'll see the size of the appendix trimmed down a bit.
Yes, thank you, Sandy. It's certainly sometimes feels like a long upward struggle, but it is making progress, and those of you that have been on the audit committee for a considerable time will notice and have been involved in scrutinising some of these incremental changes and progress. So, without further ado, I'd like to ask for any questions you may have of this report. Gail, thanks.
Sorry, can I add something around 2.9 in your covering paper, the action report ANO 522, and just by way of information for the committee to say that as in addition to reports being taken to the NHS Tayside Audit and Risk Committee, we are also taking the report to the NHS Tayside Care Governance Committee to ensure they're updated around the progress of the internal audit in primary care services. And the good news is one of the other actions, the advert for the Associate Medical Director is now out for circulation. So hopefully I'll be able to report at your next committee on the progress around that.
Thanks for that update, Gail. That's very useful information. So if there are no any other questions, I'd just like to move on to recommendations. There's only one. It's to note the report and the progress made to date in terms of delivering the planned response. Happy to accept? Yes, is the general feeling. Right, thank you. Move on to item number 6, which is the 22-23 and 23-24 audit plan progress report. And again, Sandy, do you just go straight to Barry with that one? So Barry, could you give us a talk to that paper, please?
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. I just want to say a few brief words on this report. All previous plans are now complete, with the workforce audit presented later on today's agenda. We'd like to thank management for their sort of exceptional level of support received during fieldwork, including of our audit reports. The non-discretional elements of the 23-24 plan have been delivered, for example, the annual report. As mentioned earlier within the internal audit plan paper, I am aware there's been issues around sort of the delivery of the plan and the flow of work to the committee, and we're committed to finding new ways to ensure a more timely delivery and flow of assurance to the audit committee, with the new Chief Internal Auditor in post and through discussions with our council colleagues in the split of work. We're hopeful and more committed to achieving sort of the plan in a more timely manner and continuously throughout the year. I don't have anything else to add at this point.
Do you want to add something, Sandy?
Yeah, I just add, I mean, I've obviously had a chance to speak to the internal auditors about our plan. We've seen the plan earlier on in the papers, and it's helpful that Barry has just referenced the fact that one or two things have been, we haven't been quite as timely with one or two things over the last year or so. But I do feel the paper that we've seen earlier on, where we talk about the bringing forward of some of that work and different timeline, I think that's probably going to help us all the way through. And as Barry said, this is one of the it is one of the responses that I think will help improve the timeliness. So Obviously, time will tell, but we will also continue to work as hard as we can and as constructively as we can with our internal audit colleagues to make sure we have things coming together on a timely basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Yeah, it's good to see that the last year's plan is complete and all the items on the current plan are green, so that's good news. Right, I'm going to open it for questions now, and Catherine Lindsay, could you please, yeah, you've got your hand up. Catherine?
Thank you very much. Chair, sorry, there is quite an echo there. So just a couple of points to note. The reference on page 38 around mental health and drug and alcohol recovery, and those being strategic risks that sit with the IJB as articulated by the NHS board's papers. I just wondered whether it was worth hearing any details around this with the challenges that are reported there. And secondly, I just wanted to point out, I think, an erroneous reference on page 40 to random cash counts and cash handling at Bramble Cottages. Bramble Cottages are children's services facilities and not within the remit of the IJB. Thank you.
Thanks for that. These questions, I don't know, who's probably Sandy and Gail?
Well, I'll pick up the second one, although I know it's an internal audit report. I think what we were trying to do here, Catherine, you're right, those services are children's services. I think the internal auditors were trying to give a sense of issues that were prevalent in both NHS Tayside and Angus Council. But we'll mention that second point to well, maybe not Barry, but between Barry and myself, we'll mention that second point to the authors of this report. And this particular item probably won't reappear, but you are right to flag it up. But I think they were probably just making a general observation about issues that were coming up, because it's one of a number of actions that have appeared in that report. So we'll certainly follow that one up. The mental health and drugs recovery. You were looking for an update. Gail, do you want to come in there? Yeah.
Catherine, was it?
Sorry, colleagues, there is no sound.
Oh, sorry, Catherine. There are a number of reports going round in Angus. I'm sure some of the team, Karen Melville and the team, would be able to support you with that if you want out with, or was your suggestion that the audit committee got an update?
Thank you, Gail. I just wondered in relation to the opportunity today to set out how we plan to kind of plug the gap around governance. Obviously, a lot of the reporting sits within other IJBs, and I know that we've had some previous conversation about the loop back into Angus, so it was less of a personal request for an update and more just an opportunity, I suppose, to showcase the conversations that are happening pan Tayside to strengthen what's been flagged as a potential gap there.
Yes, I can certainly action that, and I heard my colleagues on the TV last night and in fact on the news again this morning about that very issue.
Thanks, Gail. Thanks, Sandy. Catherine, with those assurances from Gail and Sandy, are you happy with that response?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? No.
Sorry, colleagues, there's no sound coming over the live feed.
Sorry, we're having trouble with our fingers this morning, but thanks for pointing that out. Yes, moving on to the recommendation, there's only one. Audit committee is asked to note the work undertaken relating to the 23-22 and 23-24 audit plans. We're happy with that, thank you. I'll just leave this button on. Okay, we'll move on to item 7. That's the governance action plan, and again, that's Sandy, I think.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So this one is a bit more positive, and I think there's visible signs of us making some progress on this one. Again, just purely judging by what the Appendix 1 looks like, it is now quite a lot shorter than it was maybe 6 or 12 months ago, which is a good thing. I'm just going to give you an update about 2 or 3 things, everybody. Section 3.2 in the covering report, we are just noting where we are with lead partner services. Things haven't moved on dramatically in the summer, but we will bring a report back to the IJB's Audit Committee in December. But turning to the Appendix 1, we have got a couple of, all the issues on here are long-standing. We have got a couple of them solved since we last met. There was a workforce issue, which is the second one here. That was largely solved by the time we met last time, but we were looking for it to move into practical resolution, and we have now been able to practically implement that. And so that's why we've now made that one marked up as complete. It was already on track, but it's moved now to being completed because it is now being kind of actioned as far as we are going to take it right now, but it's ready to go, and that's a good thing. And then the second last one, again, it's marked up as complete, and that was completed essentially at the June IJB meeting, which happened after the last Audit Committee. For people who recall, we took a paper to the IJB dealing with this issue and agreed a new position through the IJB, and having done that, we're now able to wrap this one up. And although I've made our kind of comments on how some of the lists of actions do get longer on previous papers today, these 2 actions are things that have been around for a while, so it is helpful to have got them concluded based on work over recent months. I would further add, though, the very last item on this, which is about considering the SIT for ethical framework. That is another one, much like the point that Peter raised earlier on, that had taken me a long time to get back to. It just required a bit of time, a bit of space, and I've been able to do that actually in the last few working days. And I will share something with Audit Committee members over the next few working days, out with the meeting of the Audit Committee, just to give you all an update, and then we'll be able to come back to that. So we have been able to make some progress with that, although you can't see that in this paper. That said, Chair, obviously happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sandy. That's yeah, I can remember when that list was a lot longer, and it's encouraging to see it dwindling down to 1 page, and hopefully they'll all be cleared off. So, has anybody got any questions to ask on this governance report? No. Let's just move on to the recommendation. Again, there's only one: to note the report and the progress made to date in terms of delivering the planned response. I'd be happy to accept. Thank you. Right, now, as I said, can we take item 9 before item 8 at this stage? Which item 9 is the internal audit report on the workforce plan related to item AN 0423. So there's a report on that from Chief Finance Officer. I don't know. Do you want to introduce that, and does it go on to Barry after that? Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Chair. So yes, we've already talked about this. This is the final component of the 22-23 internal audit plan, the delivery of the outcomes of the workforce audit that's been undertaken over the last few months. This is one, I think, Barry, hopefully fair to say, this has probably taken a wee bit longer to get to this point than we would have all liked for various issues that Tony Gaskell had described at previous meetings. But we've got the report now, it's been widely shared. And I think generally it's a relatively positive report. I'll let Barry comment on it himself in a second. We feel it's generally a positive report. A couple of actions in here. One's already complete. One about the improvement and development of our KPIs, key performance indicators for workforce measures. We have a bit more work to do. We always knew that anyway, and we hope to have concluded that by March 2024, which sounds like a long time away, but actually isn't that far away. Alongside this, just again for people's information, we are currently, we might have actually done it already, but we're currently consulting on the development and the writing up of our new workforce plan, or the annual update for the workforce plan. So that is sitting kind of alongside this work that's going on routinely. Some of the outcomes of this piece of work will feed into that, and I think that will come back to the IJB maybe in October. Yeah. That's just my brief comments on that, but you'll maybe give Barry the opportunity if he wants to add anything.
Ms. Barry?
Yeah, I really just want to echo your comments. It's a positive report in relation to the elements of our scope of this work and the compliance with legislation and links to risk management. I really don't have much more to add at this point. Happy to take any questions. I will try and answer them, but I wasn't involved in this audit, so if there's anything I need to take away, I can come back, but if there's any questions, I'll consider them.
Thanks, Barry. Yeah, there's certainly the list of pickup points is definitely not onerous. So can we open that to questions? Catherine, Lindsay.
Thank you. As a point for clarification, really probably more than a question, but on page 60, in the box that is capturing the management response and action, I wondered whether or not 6 lines down, the reference to the IJB will ensure that. I wondered if that might better read as the Health and Social Care Partnership will ensure that. But it was really just a point of clarification.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. Yeah, well, I was going to say technically, no, forget the word technically, that is correct. It should say HSCP there, yeah. And we'll see if we can get that amended in the final version of this report. But we'll not resubmit, assuming everybody's happy, we'll not resubmit this back to the Audit Committee, but we'll change that in the formal documentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for the question. Catherine, any more questions? Okay, I'd like to move on to the recommendations, of which there are 2. First one is notes the findings of the output of the internal audit into the workforce plan. And secondly, requests that follow-up actions as described in the management response are monitored through the regular internal audit follow-up reports to the Audit Committee. Are we happy with those recommendations? Yes. Thank you.
I'm so sorry, Chair.
Oh, you have another question.
I'm so sorry. So there's quite a lot of feedback here.
Is it okay? Is it
yes,
all right now? And I'll switch my phone.
Okay. So sorry, I think I perhaps missed my opportunity to just kind of clarify the opinion really around the frequency of reporting around the workforce plan, and the progress with that is stated in the report as to be annual and to be continuing as annual. But I did notice in one of the reports that we'll call later, again, that it's been highlighted that workforce planning is a significant risk within the IJB itself, and that the score remains at 20. And whether or not from an audit perspective we were satisfied with that frequency of reporting to the IJB, bearing in mind that there is obviously reporting and scrutiny that sits underneath that, but I think just it would be helpful maybe for this committee to have a bit of feedback on before we formally agree the report.
Thanks for that question. Can I ask Sandy or Barry or Gail to comment?
Yeah. Catherine, as recently as this Catherine, as recently as this week, that score has now been revised to 16. They have agreed that, but the paper was already issued, Catherine. So, yeah, it's 16. But I agree, if it is something like 20, it should be much more frequent reporting, which I did highlight to the group myself, Catherine.
Thank you.
You happy with that response, Catherine? Thank you. Very well, can we move on to the... Oh, I've already read the recommendations and we've already approved them, so I won't reapprove them. Move on to item number 8, which is the 2020 Integration Joint Board assurances received from partners. Talk to that one, Sandy, please.
Yep, thanks, Chair. I was hoping this was going to be a routine report, and at this point, unfortunately, Mark and Pauline, your ears might need to prick up a wee bit because we've just got a wee bit of an update that we're going to have to bring into the discussion today. Routinely, this would be us providing an update of the assurances that we have shared from ourselves to the Audit Committee and the Chair of the Audit Committee with our partners. We've done all that, it's set out in the report. And it also summarises the assurance we've had back from various parties, Angus Council, NHS Tayside, Perth, Ross and Dundee. And that all is absolutely okay. The only minor hiccup we've had in section 3.1, we talk about an Angus Council Scrutiny and Audit Committee meeting that was going ahead yesterday, and it did go ahead yesterday. Some members of the committee might have been in attendance, but our understanding is now is that not all the business of that meeting was concluded by the time the meeting finished, and that the letter that we were anticipating being issued that's attached at Appendix 1 of this paper, which is one part of that, was an item that perhaps wasn't reached in the business of the meeting. So we haven't got that formal confirmation, or we understand right now, and the meeting is, we think, being pushed back 1 week, is going to be reconvened in a week's time. So that's just become aware of just very recently. So that aside, the content of this all still stands, and we did only have a draft letter, which is what we were seeking to note, and a piece in this meeting. So I think on that basis, this paper itself is hopefully okay, but I think we might just have to reflect on the formalities of that issue I've just flagged up. And I'll pause there, and I don't know if either our external auditors want to comment on that, but we might need to just mull that one over today. And I'm happy to take any questions, of course.
Yeah, well, okay, that's, as you say, it kind of puts a bit of a hiccup. In essence, I think it would affect recommendation number 2, because we can't really, that would have to be rephrased in some way to pick up the fact that we're still waiting for the approval. But has anybody got, has any of the, Barry, do you have any comments on that, or Pauline, any views, opinion, or anybody else in the meeting? Pauline, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We could perhaps pick this up offline with the CFO after this meeting, if that's possible.
Yeah, that is, of course, absolutely possible. And I do apologise, we have only just become aware of this. And I suppose what I would perhaps suggest, we obviously can have a further discussion with our external auditors, and maybe one of the ways we can get around this is that we accept the recommendations generally, but do put a caveat in to say that this is with the caveat that we haven't got the formalities regarding section 3.1 of the report resolved at the date of the meeting. Because I do feel the content of the letter is written as a draft, which is shown as Appendix 1, is written as a draft. We haven't any particular reason to think that things will diverge from that draft at the moment, and nothing said to us would make us believe that. And so I think if we were comfortable about doing that, that would potentially be a way to just move this paper itself on, but with that general caveat that section 3.1 of the report will need to be refined.
Okay, is everybody happy with that? Okay, there just remains the... Yes. Thank you. There just remains the issue of how do we phrase this? Have we got a legal answer to this dilemma that we've got? What are the actual words we put into the recommendation? Can anybody advise on that?
Chair.
Lots of questions all of a sudden. I don't know who was first, because I don't have a timeline on here, but Catherine, can we take you first?
Thank you. My reading of the paper as it currently stands is that recommendation 1.1 asks the Audit Committee to note the position regarding confirmation of receipt of assurance from Angus Council. I think that we would be in a position to agree that recommendation on the basis that we have a paper, we've had a verbal update which will be noted in the minute, and we are noting the position, and the position is that the approval will be considered by Angus Council's Scrutiny and Audit Committee on Tuesday morning next week. I don't think it's inconsistent for us to approve that in the way that it's worded at the moment.
Okay, thanks for that, Catherine. Elaine?
I suppose my question is, and I'm just conscious we're probably presuming that that will come through and that will then be given, but do we have a plan B if that assurance is not given? Would we need to reconvene potentially for an extraordinary meeting? Or I'm just conscious that if we go forward planning that that assurance will come, do we have some mechanism that we can then reconvene if we don't have that assurance?
Thanks, Elaine. Sandy?
Hi, Elaine. Yes, so right now we would have mechanisms that are already available to the IJB's Audit Committee, which is about triggering another meeting whenever that needed to be, if that was something that we needed to do. But this was relatively new news, so we haven't particularly plotted something out or agreed anything. Obviously, we're talking about this in the context of agenda item 8. There is the flow through to agenda item 10. I suppose I'm suggesting here that we agree agenda item 8, which is about the assurances, because all the information here is as good as we know at the particular point in time. And when we come to 10, which is obviously a pretty substantive item, hopefully we can potentially agree as much as we possibly can with, and just have this residual caveat and work out that maybe through our discussions with our external auditors how we plot our way through that. So I think I'm thinking here, Elaine, we try and agree through this committee as much as we can based on what we have in front of us. And that potentially is saying is this committee is comfortable with things, assuming such and such happens in due course, or pending the outcome of discussions with our external auditors after the meeting. So we don't have a plan B, but we always have the facility to arrange an additional meeting of the audit committee. So that might be something we have to resort to.
Okay, thank you for that explanation, Sandy. So, any other questions on this matter? It's a moot point, but it's very important for the flow of the audited accounts, approvals, etc. So, I don't think what I'm hearing is we don't need to change the wording of the recommendations. We're comfortable with that, and if needs be, if there is a kind of doomsday scenario, then we will call another audit meeting to approve the missing piece. And we did really find out about this sort of seconds before the meeting, so unfortunately we've not had a chance to give it a smoother consideration. But hopefully with that, with those kind of thoughts in mind, and I don't particularly want to read out all because there's quite a lot of them. You've read them, we've considered them. Are we happy to approve those with the caveats as mentioned? Yes, I see some nodding heads there, and thank you very much. That brings us to item 10, in fact, which is the substantive report of this meeting, which is the audited annual accounts, a report by the Chief Finance Officer. Sandy?
Okay, thanks, Chair. I will quickly introduce this, but clearly, based on the content of this, I will pass over to our external audit colleagues in a few minutes, or in a minute or two. Just in terms of introduction, the IJB's Audit Committee received the draft annual accounts on an unaudited basis when we met at the end of June. We shared those accounts with our external auditors soon after, by the end of June. We have made changes based on various discussions with the auditors during the audit process, and they're set out in section 3. A couple of additions that we've made, and some almost to be expected punctuation, wording, and other types of corrections. The auditors will flag up that there are some recommendations in here, and we're happy to accept those. We've included management responses in Appendix 2, And we'll also review all the other observations made in the report and follow up any other kind of learning from the audit and other thoughts that are captured in the report. But at that point, Chair, I think I could pass over to Pauline and Mark and let them pick up from there.
Thank you, Sandy. Pauline, do you want to go first?
Thank you, Chair. This is actually my first time at committee, so perhaps just by way of introduction, my name's Pauline Gillan, Audit Director at Audit Scotland, and the appointed auditor for the Integrated Joint Board. So the reports that we're bringing to you today, I'm joined by my colleague Mark Laird, who has been at committee before as a senior manager in the audit. And the papers we're bringing to you today are the annual audit report at the conclusion of our annual audit for 22-23, and subject to the issues raised at the previous agenda item, I'll just proceed on the basis of what we've got here, but obviously discussions will be taken offline in terms of when we physically sign off the accounts, which may change from that outlined in the covering letter. So if I just draw members' attention to our covering letter at page 67 of your pack, this letter is addressed to this committee as those charged with governance under ISA 260. And the important bit to note of this letter is at paragraph 1, where we confirm that the annual audit is now substantially complete and subject to some final checks at our end, and obviously confirmation of that assurance from the council. I'm in a position to provide an unqualified audit opinion on the financial statements and annual audit report. I'm required to report to this committee any significant issues or findings that have arisen from our audit work. There were no significant issues to bring to your attention, but I'll perhaps discuss that in a second once I get on to the substantive annual audit report. I'm also required to report to you any unadjusted misstatements, accounts that exceed our reporting threshold, which you may remember from our annual audit plan earlier in the year is 200,000. I'm pleased to report that there are no unadjusted misstatements, and in fact there were no misstatements that required to be adjusted in the annual report and accounts this year, other than those minor narrative changes that were outlined at the previous paper. I'm also required, when I'm presenting this report to you, to confirm that the members are not aware of any instances of actual suspected or alleged fraud, any events that have occurred since the date of the financial statements, 31st of March, or any material non-compliance with laws and regulations that should be brought to my attention. Nothing has been brought to my attention up until this point, so I'll perhaps just pause to confirm that remains the case and members don't want to raise anything at this committee at this point.
No, don't see anything, Pauline.
Thank you, that's good. Okay, just to move on, you'll see Appendix A of this report, we have a copy of the proposed independent auditor's report, which has been placed in the annual report and accounts and will be signed by me shortly, hopefully. Also attached to this letter, Appendix B, is ISA 580, a letter prepared in accordance with ISA 580, and it's a letter of management representation. And this is a standard letter that members will have seen in previous years, and it just provides me with a number of assurances from management. That'll be signed by the Chief Finance Officer at the same time that the accounts are signed. So to move on to the next paper, which is at page 77. So this is the formal annual audit report, which summarises the findings from the work that we've carried out throughout the year, 22-23. I will take the paper as read, so I won't go into it in a huge amount of detail, but just to draw your attention to the key messages at page 79, 3 of the report. And it outlines the key messages and findings from the audit work that we've carried out this year. The first section relates to the statutory reporting that we're required to do as part of the audit, the financial statements, so the annual accounts. And the other areas cover those wider dimension areas that we're required to look at under the scope of public sector audit. A couple of things to draw to your attention. The first of those is at paragraphs 21 to 23 of the report. This is where we would typically outline the significant findings from the audit and bring those to your attention. As I said in the covering paper, there were no significant issues that we discovered during our audit, which is great and good to report to the committee. We also, as I said before, there were no identified misstatements in the annual accounts that required to be adjusted. The next thing to bring to your attention is further down that page at Exhibit 3. This table outlines the significant risks of material misstatement that we reported on in our annual audit plan at the start of the year. So you'll see there that we just have one risk. That risk is a standard risk that you'll see in all annual audit plans and is covered by all audits, and that is the risk of material misstatement due to fraud caused by management override of controls. And as I said, that's a standard test risk that you'll see in all audits. The middle column outlines the procedures and the testing that we carried out throughout the year just to address the risk. And you'll see in the results and conclusions column that we did not find any issues with any of the work that we carried out in this area. We also identified in our annual audit plan, but further down there at paragraph 25, 2 other areas of audit focus that we plan to cover during the year. One of those was in relation to reserves and specifically the COVID-19 funding that was required to be transferred back to Scottish Government. Also, the large hospital set aside and mental health services estimates. So we did some additional work in those 2 areas during the audit, and I'm pleased to advise you that there were no issues arising from that work that we need to bring to your attention. So perhaps if we can then just turn to Appendix 1, which is our action plan. And you'll see there that we have a couple of recommendations. Scroll right past it. So we have one recommendation, and that relates to financial sustainability. You'll see that we also follow up prior year recommendations, and in previous years there was also an issue related to financial sustainability. That remains this year, as you would expect, but we've reframed it slightly and just put a little bit more detail in there, and you'll see that we've got an agreed management action and timing for that to be addressed. We didn't have any other action plan points for this year. We also did follow up the workforce and succession planning risk that we identified in the 21-22 audit, and you'll see there that we have marked that as complete. This is obviously coming off the back of the internal audit report that had some recommendations coming out of workforce planning. The reason we've noted this as complete is because our specific point last year was specifically around about succession planning for senior management and just having plans in place to replace those people when they leave. So we were content that that part of the action had been addressed, and obviously going forward we'll take note of progress against the recommendations that internal audit raised in their workforce planning review this year. So that was all I had planned to say. I'm happy to take any questions. As I said, Mark is here to help me with any questions you have. And obviously we've noted in the covering letter the plan had been after this committee. Once members have approved the accounts for signing, then they would have been signed later on today. But perhaps if just to follow up on that discussion we had earlier, we can chat offline about when we are able to sign off. But I think it would be appropriate for this committee to perhaps consider whether they wish to approve the accounts for signing and caveat it with that outstanding Angus Council assurance letter. But happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, thanks, Pauline. Before I go on to questions, Mark, have you anything to add to what Pauline said?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, no, nothing to add. I think Pauline's given a comprehensive overview of what's in the report there, and the covering letter as well, with our draft opinion or our proposed opinion at this stage. So no, nothing to add, but I'm happy to answer any questions as Pauline said. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, I'll open it to questions from the floor. Catherine?
I don't have a question about the content of the report, more a comment and a question that's aligned but possibly not to be answered by yourselves. So I'll start at the beginning. Firstly, I thought it was a very helpful, very well laid out and really clear report. It was easy to understand as somebody who doesn't necessarily look at these sorts of reports on a day-to-day basis. So I really appreciated that. Thank you very much. the kind of observation that I would make, and my question for others is probably more around the workforce and succession planning. So I note the action and the updates there, and that's very positive. But there is also the commentary in the report itself, which is about our fairly acute situation in relation to having a chief officer who has tendered their notice in terms of retirement. And I was hoping that there might be an opportunity today just to have some assurance around the arrangements that are being put in place and the likely timescales for any recruitment to that post, and any action or prompting that might be required or supported by audit committee members and or IJB members themselves to that effect. Thank you.
Thanks for that question, Gail.
Sorry,
I don't know if it's appropriate I respond, but I can confirm that the advert is done. There has been prompting. I'll not say between who, and I do have a meeting myself with HR at 1 p.m. today regarding the very issue, Catherine.
Thanks, Gail. Catherine, is that reassurance?
Yes, thank you. I think it's just helpful to have that on record for the audit committee themselves, a bit of assurance around the process being underway given the timescales. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, I'm very new to the world of audits. I think as probably everybody's aware, but hey, 1 year on, we're learning. Really just a comment on the report, you know, certainly from a staff side point of view for the local authority, is again, it's another document that's making clear the cuts that will need to be made and are coming down the line for the Integrated Joint Board and the Health and Social Care Partnership in the future. And obviously our worry and concerns around that. And as I say, yet again, it's another piece of it. It's another official document that is bringing that point clearly home. And I do have significant reservations and worries about how that's going to look. Looking at the West Lothian IJB situation recently, where there was proposals to close their remaining care homes, for example. These kind of things would cause us some significant concern. But yeah, it's just a comment on the fact that there it is. We're facing significant cuts to the services that are delivered by the Health and Social Care Partnership, and our associated concerns and worries with that, Andrew. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Note your concerns, and I don't know if anybody wants to respond to that. But, Sandy?
Yeah, Chris. I mean, you're right to flag this issue up, and you're obviously right to flag it up from the perspective that you're bringing to that discussion. We're seeing, in terms of transparency about the challenges, we're trying to bring those to the IJB relatively regularly. I think, gosh, I mean, I feel this year we've maybe taken reports in February and certainly April, and we've got one coming this afternoon. And none of those have particularly said this is the way out of it. So we haven't managed to kind of describe that in all the work that we've done so far. There doesn't look to be obvious solutions coming from a national level. You know, there's not somebody coming to the rescue here in terms of, say, funding issues. So we have got challenges that, you know, we are going to have to work our way through as an IJB. We're obviously not unique in this. It's an issue that's prevalent across all the health boards and probably all the councils, and therefore probably all the IJBs across Scotland. There was a national IJB meeting earlier on this week, and the issues that we face are replicated elsewhere. And that means the likelihood of an individual area being resolved by some kind of one-off bespoke intervention from the government is much less, because it's a common issue. Whereas perhaps in the past, issues have propped up in one or two council areas, or more likely one or two health board areas. We're seeing something that's endemic across the whole of Scotland and most of the public sector that we're engaged with. So we will try and continue to be as transparent as we can with the IJB members, including papers that we've provided this afternoon. And I have no doubt that's an issue we'll come back to regularly over the coming months in IJB meetings. But thank you.
Thanks for that response, Sandy. Chris, is that you've raised?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, as I say, just a general comment, but I appreciate you coming back, Sandy, with the view from the Chief Finance Officer's seat. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure there's other platforms where you can raise those concerns, and I'm sure you will. But your concerns are noted. Thanks. Are there any further questions regarding the report? No. So can I move on to the recommendations then? They're quite lengthy as well, but probably read them out this time, seeing it's a substantive thing, and we've had quite a bit of a discussion on it. So recommendation 1, consider and accept the external auditor's annual audit report for Angus IJB, including the associated covering letter, which includes the proposed independent auditor's report for the period to the 31st of March 2023. Specifically, this includes noting the key audit report recommendations, accepting the associated agreed management actions. Secondly, consider the annual accounts and then approve the audited annual accounts for signature by Chair, Chief Officer and Chief Finance Officer of the IJB, and request that the updates regarding management actions are reported to the December 2023 Audit Committee meeting. And understanding that for item 2 we do have that undertaking to have offline discussions regarding the reassurances from the Angus Council, and should those prove to be quite smooth, we won't need to call another audit committee meeting, but if they become issues then we will. So given those caveats, are we happy to approve those recommendations? Yes, all round. Thank you very much, everybody. Sandy, you want to say something?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I apologise again for the item, the caveat we're having to add there, but I just would like at this point to say a couple of things. It's basically thank you to our auditors on one hand for the work and particularly the timeliness of getting the report to today. You know, we know that's a difficulty, and we know we've got to work together to do that. So I just want to say thank you very much to the team for helping us with that, and also, you know, I suppose just take this opportunity to thank people in my own team for the contribution to the year-end work. I know particularly people like Jane Mugg, who's not on the call today, but may well be watching somewhere on YouTube, I don't know, but just to say thank you to Jane and other members of my team for that, because I think it is important that we obviously work as constructively as we can with our external auditors to get things to today's meeting. So thank you to everybody involved in that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sandy, and thanks for the from the meeting as well for that extraordinary effort that goes into these things. Thank you. Okay, so that's item 10. There's item 11. Before we go on to the date of the next meeting, there's a couple of things I need to mention. The first one is that our normally have a development session in October in place of an audit committee meeting. So just flagging that up at this point, and I don't know, Sandy, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, we normally have, as Andrew says, we normally have an annual development session of the Audit Committee. For the last couple of years, I think it's maybe been slightly delayed. Certainly the one for the year we just finished a while back. We only held in February 23. It really, I think, would be helpful to get back to holding them in October regularly. It's a good time of the year, well in advance of things like the year end, and it's, dare I say, maybe a slightly quieter time of the year. I don't know, probably isn't. But we will try and hold it again this coming October. It'll be on the date of the IJB meeting. I can't remember what that is, but you'll have that in your diary. So we'll issue an invite, but we'll also put some maybe prompts for the agenda, and also put an ask out there in case there's any issues that people are wanting to deal with. And it could be things like training, right the way tying back to the point Peter made at the start of the meeting about outstanding actions. Could be that kind of thing. But we'll have a look at some issues that have maybe come through various meetings in the last wee while. Gail's just flagging up the meeting is the next IJB meeting is the 25th of October. So we would try and schedule the development session before that over the lunchtime. Thank you, Gail. So yeah, we'll put that call out, ask for any views about things. We'll also look at recent agendas to see if there's things that we feel would be useful to bring forward. Thanks, Chair. Thanks for that, Sandy. And the last thing on the agenda, before we actually declare the next audit meeting, is that, in fact, this is going to be Gail's last audit meeting, I believe.
if my calculations are correct, given the November deadline and the October that we've just talked about. Gail needs no introduction, and she attends every audit meeting that I've ever been at, so regularly helping us with matters arising from the kind of the business side of and the operational sides. But it's a shame that she hasn't quite mastered the buttons on the microphone yet, but I'll always have time for that. But given, and I must apologise that you've had some pointed questions fired in your direction today, which kind of is relevant, but kind of you handled them very well. So I think we're all very appreciative of Gail's kindly, compassionate, knowledgeable attitude that she brings with us and brings with her. Sorry, I've not had much time to prepare, so I only kind of got prompted about this a minute ago. But on behalf of the Audit Committee, I would like to appreciate all the work you've done here at the Audit Committee and obviously everywhere else as well. And I personally appreciate all the help you've given me through the years that I've been involved. So thanks very much, and I hope you have a very happy, long and fulfilling retirement.
Well, I mastered the... I can't believe it. I don't know why I don't manage. I know I'm going to have a few months of this. I don't actually finish till the 10th of November, so there's going to be a lot of last meetings. So, but I would like just to wish all of you all the best and keep up the good work. As Sandy knows, I don't like seeing reds in action plans, so you need to keep folks and ensure that they're all moving forward, particularly the outstanding action that's been there for a few years. We'll get there yet. I would have liked that over the line before I've left, but you're nearly there. So thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, Gail. And that just brings us to the next formal Audit Committee meeting is Wednesday, the 13th of December at 11:30 in this place or online or hybrid. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending, and safe journey onwards, Peter. Bring on. You at your destination yet? Hopefully you'll get there. Right, thanks very much, everybody.
Okay, if you stop the live stream, John.